business folds into that. Should investors anticipate any material changes in the structure of those businesses within Airbus?
We are at the moment changing the structure of our defense and space division. We used to have an integrated division. We are transitioning to a division that will be organized around 3 product lines, and we're transferring a lot of resources that were allocated transversally to the businesses. We want more accountability, we want more agility, we want to be able to benefit from the very different dynamics that we see in air power, which is our strongest business in defense and space. This is the military aviation part, compared to space and to what we call the connected intelligence. So we are transforming the shape of defense and space to better fit the world we're living in that field.
So will this stay underneath the umbrella of Airbus, or are you willing to entertain offers for potential separation?
So the air power is the core of what we do. Military aviation is really what we've been doing for long, and we think we're competitive in that field, so this will obviously remain. Now, when it comes to space, as we have already indicated, it's another large business of our Airbus defense and space activity that we are turning around, but we think the situation is such that it is worth looking at options for consolidation, for more strategic option on the space business, and that's something that is ongoing in a business, the space business, that is very much disrupted. When it comes to the smaller part of our connected intelligence, yes, we are willing to cooperate, to bring those businesses with others when and if this is meaningful. So we want to be, with what we are doing in defense and space, more agile in our ability to combine businesses with others, but we will continue to remain a strong player in defense, in military, and also in space, but probably in different forms when it comes to space moving forward, as we have to find solutions to this difficult business environment.
Guillaume, one thing that we haven't talked about is the strike at Boeing. It's an ongoing strike, and it's led some suppliers of Boeing to warn about being forced to consider furloughs and job cuts, and I know that Airbus and Boeing share many of the same suppliers. How are you looking at the situation at Boeing right now and thinking through what it means for Airbus down the road in 2025?
Yeah, thanks, Scarlett. It's a great question. Actually, as I said earlier, we have a challenging situation in the supply base. Actually, the situation at Boeing, including the strike, but not limited to the strike, is adding complexity and challenges for the supply chain of Boeing. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, it can be seen both ways. Part of this supply chain is also our supply chain. So we are monitoring very closely what it means for them, and we are taking preventive actions for the difficulties that they might have with Boeing to not have repercussions on our own relationship with them. But that's another area of concern that we have to manage in this current environment.
All right, Guillaume, appreciate you taking time to be with us today. We'll let you get back to work. Guillaume Faury there, he's the CEO over at Airbus, the world's largest plane maker.
Thank you so much, Romain. That was Guillaume Faury with Romain Bostic and Scarlett Fu, the CEO of Airbus. Tim Stanovic and Katie Greifeld live on the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Katie in for Carol Massar this afternoon. And we got a lot of companies reporting after the bell, too, that people, I think, really care about. One being Meta Platforms, the other one being Microsoft. First, I want to talk a little bit about Meta Platforms. The investors we talked to, I think, are really going to be looking to see whether the company's spending on AI is going to produce short-term and long-term returns. Revenue estimate for the third quarter, according to the Bloomberg consensus, coming in at just over $40 billion, Katie.
It's interesting, of course, the results in and of themselves, but it's also interesting, of course, what it could mean for some of the other companies that we care a lot about. I'm talking, of course, about NVIDIA.
Yeah, talk about this supply chain function on the Bloomberg
So we have a
terminal.
great function on the Bloomberg terminal, SPLC. So you think about NVIDIA, where it actually gets its revenue from, who its biggest customers are. Microsoft, right at the top, that is 19% of their revenue, almost. Right under that, Meta Platforms, 10.1% of NVIDIA's revenue.
That's why this week is so important for NVIDIA, even though we don't hear from NVIDIA until next month.
They report so late.
I know, it's weird.
You know,
Jensen Huang can do whatever he wants.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, we'll see, of course. You see NVIDIA shares down today by about 1.3%.
Wow. So what does that mean for the year for NVIDIA?
Oh, they're probably up a gazillion percent, roughly. But, you know, that was after we got AMD earnings last night, and they disappointed.
182% this year.
Go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So NVIDIA, I mean, today it's barely a scratch on the surface, but the AMD results were interesting. Of course, you think about you know, the disappointment there. They've been trying to catch up to NVIDIA. Obviously, NVIDIA, I think some analysts say it's about a year head start or something. So we'll see. But of course, some big important earnings after the bell when you think about the complexion, the makeup of these indexes.
Okay, it's not just Microsoft and Meta Platforms today. We also expect Booking Holdings, Amgen, Equinix, DoorDash, Starbucks, Aflac, Compass, GoDaddy, and more. Starbucks, you're a big Starbucks person.
Huge.
You're like the only one, and that's the problem now.
I know, they really need to diversify their customer base.
What's going on?
I don't know. I mean...
What's kept you loyal?
Oh, I mean, just pure convenience. I have the app. I get rewards on the app for every 200 stars I earn. I get a free drink, and that's really important to me in these tough economic times.
Is 200 stars $200?
You know, I don't know. They've
idea.
switched it around a few times, so I'm not sure. I just know that I buy every single morning, and sometimes I get a free drink.
Investors are going to be watching what Brian Nichols says very closely. I'm still waiting for the Doritos Locos Latte, but...
I think he's got some other issues to sort through first.
All right, we'll see. The closing bell coming up next, our cross-platform coverage of the market close. Bloomberg's The Closing Bell starts right now.
Like, let's say somebody is an Uber or Lyft driver today, where they can actually sort of manage a fleet of cars, and manage, I don't know, 10, 20 cars, and just sort of take care of them like a shepherd tends their flock. You have a little flock of cars, and you're the shepherd, and you take care of your flock of cars. I think that'd be pretty cool. I think it's going to be a glorious future. It's going to be really something special. So, yes, good, all excellent questions. We do expect actually to start fully autonomous, unsupervised FSD in Texas and California next year, and that's with the Model 3 and Model Y, and then we expect to be in production with the Cybercab, which is really highly optimized for autonomous transport. In probably, well, I tend to be a little optimistic with timeframes, but in 2026. So, yeah, before 2027. Let me put it that way. We'll make this vehicle in very high volume, but well before that, you will experience a robotic taxi via the Model 3 and Model Y program, and Model S and X too. But your 3 and Y will achieve unsupervised full self-driving with permission in wherever regulators essentially approve it in the U.S. and then to follow in outside the U.S. So, and it's Cybertruck too. Yes, of course. Sorry, I don't want to forget. Yes. All our cars, basically, all cars that we make. So.
The S&P 500, as things do settle out, kind of an even split between gainers and decliners today. As of now, 243 stocks did move higher, 259 did move to the downside.
All right, let's take a look at the sector performances here. A mix, but certainly to the downside. You have tech, the biggest sector in the S&P 500, losing 1.3% on the day. That is weakness in chip makers. Staples and utilities also down by 0.25%. Communication services, which is really Alphabet in this case, up almost 1%. Financial services and REITs also modestly higher.
Okay, as we do wait for some of these numbers to cross, let's quickly get to some of the gainers on the day today. Do you want to start with one that Scarlett just mentioned?
Hey, just going to interrupt you right now. Microsoft earnings now crossing the wire here. Their fiscal first quarter revenue coming in at about $65.6 billion. We're just going to round that up to 66 billion. The street was looking for roughly 65. Revenue out of the Azure and cloud services business, XFX coming in at about 34% gain on a quarter-over-quarter basis, year-over-year basis, excuse me, here, and that's relatively in line with estimates as well. EPS, your bottom line number, $3.30 a share. Not quite sure what the comparison is on that, but it does look like a beat on the top and bottom line, though you're seeing the market reaction here, at least for right now. Not a whole lot going on.
Yeah, up about 0.8% in the after hours. Microsoft, that is. Booking Holdings shares are higher, well, bouncing around a little bit. They were up 2.7%. Now they are just pretty much flat. Third quarter gross bookings coming in way above estimates at 43.4 billion. Estimates were for 41.37 billion dollars. Third quarter room nights sold 299 million, beating estimates of 290. Third quarter revenue coming in at $8 billion. Estimates were for $7.63 billion. Shares unchanged in the after hours.
Let's also take a look at Amgen coming out with third quarter numbers. Adjusted EPS in the third quarter came in at $5.58. That is better than the estimate, which was for $5.10. Looking through it, it looks like it was on lower than estimated costs right now. You take a look at what the shares are doing, and it's not too much right now on Amgen. Of course, traders still digesting some of these numbers.
All right, I just want to go back to Microsoft for a moment because it's really the behemoth here until we get Meta. And first quarter EPS, we do have a comparable number here, $3.30, beating the consensus estimate of $3.11. And once again, that Azure and other cloud services revenue ex-FX, when you back out the FX effect, 34%. Analysts were looking for 35%. So I don't know if we call that a miss or in line. It depends how investors are feeling. Given that the stock has not done very well, Romain, maybe this is a matches kind of situation.
And that is a big deal here. And of course, that will be a big topic of conversation when we get to the conference call where they usually give their forward guidance, not included in the release, but just very quickly here, we should point out that most of their units here are posting pretty strong growth, including even in that personal computer space, a much smaller business, $13.2 billion in revenue, but that was up 17% year over year. Microsoft shares now starting to see a little bit of traction to the upside. Yeah. Meanwhile, to the downside, let's take a quick look at Roku. Those shares down 10% here in the after-hour trade here. Net revenue in the most recent quarter, relatively in line with estimates, coming in at about 1.1 billion. Street was looking for about 1.1 billion, more or less here. But the guidance here looks like it's also relatively in line as well, 1.14 billion here. And the bottom line numbers also relatively in line. Actually, here's your number here on 4Q gross profit. And this seems to be what the market is reacting to. A slight miss on those numbers, a slight miss on a fourth quarter adjusted EBITDA as well, 30 million. Street was looking for 36.2.
All right, Roku shares down about 8% in the after hours after that report. I'm looking at shares of MicroStrategy, just a leverage bet on Bitcoin, down 5% in the after hours right now. Not even worth. What'd you say?
Nominally.
Yeah, nominal. I mean, look, third quarter revenue missed estimates, but nobody really watches that because it's just a Bitcoin play.
Just a Bitcoin play. Of course, it's been doing fantastically well if you hold it, though. Of course, Bitcoin doing well as well. Let's go back to Microsoft. Of course, it's interesting. Currently up about 2.4%. And the reason we care about Microsoft, obviously, the results in and of themselves important. But you think about Microsoft and the supply chain here. NVIDIA actually gets the majority of its revenue just from Microsoft, nearly 19% there. Its second biggest revenue source is Meta, of course, and we are awaiting Meta results as well.
Yeah, and of course, you talk about how it relies, it puts a lot of orders through NVIDIA. That brings up capital expenditures and the spending on those AI chips. And for the first quarter, the fiscal first quarter, Microsoft spent $14.92 billion. That was higher than what was anticipated, which was $14.55 billion. So that's going to be a big question mark in terms of what that means for margins going forward and whether that dings its operating income as well. Oh, we have another set of results, and that's from DoorDash. I'm just going to jump on that right now. DoorDash says third quarter adjusted EBITDA of $533 million, beating the consensus estimate. Revenue of $2.71 billion, also higher than anticipated. It sees the fourth quarter gross order value at $20.6 billion to $21 billion. Analysts were looking for $20.53 billion. So even those are beats by all those metrics. The stock is marginally lower right now in after-hours trading.
Meta Platforms out, shares down 4% in the third quarter. Revenue coming in line with estimates right around $39.9 billion. EPS at 603, and that is a beat. Here's your guidance for the fourth quarter. Revenue, the company says, will be in the range of 45 to 48 billion. Street was looking for 46. Expenses, and this is the big one, 96 to 98 billion. It had previously seen 96 to 99. So overall, holding the line on the bottom end of that estimate, but lowering slightly on the top end of that estimate as well. The CapEx spend for the full year, 38 billion to 40 billion. Previously, it had seen 37 to 40 billion. The Street was looking for about 38 billion even. So slightly higher on the expense side, slightly higher on the revenue side. EPS relatively in line with estimates.
Yeah, Meta Platform shares down about 1.6%, bouncing around a little bit in the after hours. Hey, I'm looking at shares of Starbucks right now in the after hours, down about 0.8%. The company coming out with fourth quarter net revenue at 9.07 billion. Fourth quarter China comp sales down 14%. Fourth quarter international comp sales down 9%. Fourth quarter North America comp sales down 6%. Starbucks CEO or I should say, U.S. comp sales down 6%. We're not seeing the stock move much relative to the numbers, given that a lot of this news came out ahead of time, given that Brian Niccol took over last month, and this is his first report as CEO.
And it's interesting. We are getting more Meta headlines here. They do expect fourth quarter 2024, that tax rate to be in the low teens. This is interesting. They still see significant capital expenditures growth in 2025. Of course, the whole market focusing on this. You can see Meta shares still bouncing around, like Tim said, down about 1% right now. This is a pretty clean report, but you think about the expectations for Meta. This has really been the shining star of the Mag 7, up almost 68% on a total return basis year to date. So the bar was certainly high.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, and we talk about this idea of what Zuckerberg and company articulate a little bit later, this idea here that the AI play, the metaverse play, whatever they're calling it these days, the idea that they seem to have found a bit of better articulation of not only what they're going to have on the consumer side with regards to the glasses that they currently have out, Orion, which may drop next year, and then, of course, how that all folds in to their traditional ad business on the social media platform. We're going to continue a deeper dive into Meta and to Microsoft as well, but we are getting a slew of earnings, including from Robinhood. Those shares, one of the biggest decliners in the after-hours trade, down about 12.5% after the company said monthly active users in the most recent quarter missed big time, 11 million users. The Street was looking for 12.26. Revenue coming in a bit light as well at 637 million. The Street was looking for 663 million, and transaction-based revenue also coming in a little bit light as well. Same story for net deposits. That, frankly, that is the story across all of the key metrics here, Scarlett. Basically, a modest miss, but a modest miss these days gets you a big downdraft in the shares.
Yeah, very well said. Let's also jump over to cryptocurrency and take a look at Coinbase. The shares had gained ahead of the results, but we're looking at third quarter revenue of $1.13 billion, missing the consensus estimate of $1.25 billion. As for the outlook, what it anticipates, fourth quarter subscription and services revenue will be anywhere from $505 to $580 million. Analysts were looking for $578.2 million. So that's a pretty wide range, and certainly it does encompass the estimate, but perhaps not at the rate that investors are liking, and the stock is lower in after-hours trading.
Okay, I want to take a look at Meta Platforms before we go. Again, we're going to have deeper dives both on radio and on TV on all of these companies, including Meta and Microsoft. The company forecasting revenue for the fourth quarter of $45 billion to $48 billion. The estimate was for $46.09 billion,
yeah.
So bang in line there. Shares down now by a little more than 1%. All right, that is going to do it for our cross-platform coverage. The Earnings Palooza right here on Bloomberg TV, Bloomberg Radio, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals. We'll see you same time, same place tomorrow.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
It is a Bloomberg Business Week, an earnings palooza, as I mentioned. Looking at shares of Meta Platforms right now, they are lower in the after hours, but not by much. They were bouncing around a little bit, but now down about 1.1%. We got news that the company sees fourth quarter revenue coming pretty much in line with estimates, $45 billion to $48 billion. Mark Zuckerberg himself calling it a pretty good quarter, in the press release. Let's see what Mandeep Singh has to say about that. Mandeep joins us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. He's Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Technology Analyst. He's looking at these numbers. What sticks out to you, especially in the wake of what we heard yesterday from Alphabet?
Yeah, I think most of the numbers that I see are in line with expectations. I mean, the one thing is ad pricing. So ad pricing continues to tick up. If you look at this quarter, I think it was around 11%. Impressions went down a little bit. And it's just a function of how well they have been executing in terms of, implementing generative AI and really making changes that compared to Snap, who reported yesterday, we saw Snap's ad pricing decline. So, that just goes to show at what scale they are
Can we
operating.
really compare the two?
Well, I mean, digital ads is a function of how much you are better in terms of targeting versus the other platforms. So Google search, ad pricing grew 7%. Meta platforms, ad pricing grew 11%. Snap ad pricing down 7%. So it just goes to show it's easy to monetize on Snap, but you are not getting the ROI. In the case of Google and Meta, you are getting an ROI on your ad spend, and that's why advertisers are willing to spend more. So it's a function of scale, but the effectiveness is there, and that's evident in Meta platforms.
Okay.
Results. Yeah.
I want to talk about all the kooky things that they're still spending money on. Reality Labs posting a $4.4 billion loss in the third quarter. Its revenue did rise 29% year over year to $270 million in the third quarter. That was actually below analyst expectations. $4.4 billion. What are they doing over at Reality Labs?
I mean, we know it's the investments in the VR headsets, the Ray-Ban glasses we have talked about at length. And look, I think they will always be a drag on the overall operating profit, because even if they sell, hundreds, thousands, millions of these, the margins will never be comparable to their core ads business, which is north of 50%. So hardware is a money-losing business for Meta right now, and that's what's evident in that $4.4 billion loss.
One of the headlines coming out of these numbers, Meta still sees significant capital expenditures growth in 2025. I feel like I'm talking to someone right now about the Federal Reserve minutes. What does, quote, significant mean here?
Help us.
Well, so look at how much the CapEx grew in 2024 so far. And we are talking about already, a 20% bump. In the case of Microsoft, it's 50%. So significant could be 50% from, 40 billion this year. And that would get it closer to 60 billion. Now, the difference between Meta and Microsoft is the CapEx intensity for Meta is already north of 20%. Normally for large tech companies, CapEx intensity is like 10 to 15%. That's where Alphabet is at.
So where are they spending this money? Katie mentioned that about 10% of NVIDIA's revenue comes from Meta platforms, about 20% coming from Microsoft.
Yeah.
Where does Meta spend this money next year?
It's going towards GPUs. I mean, it's every large tech company right now is looking to build bigger data centers where they can train their AI. And Meta has that distinction of owning a large language model. Their Llama language model, which they didn't mention a lot in the release, but it will come up on the call. And they have talked about Meta AI having 500 million monthly active users. That is powered by Llama. In fact, there was some talk about Llama being licensed to an Amazon AWS. So they could start monetizing that. I mean, there's no mention of it in the press release, but we will hear about that on the earnings call.
I want to talk a little bit about the share reaction. Meta shares currently down over 3% right now, but I mean, it's been an incredible run for Meta. You talk about price to perfection. I don't know if perfection exactly was priced in, but the bar was certainly high for this stock.
And look at the multiple. The price to earnings multiple of Meta is 25 times forward earnings compared to an Alphabet, which is still below 20 times forward earnings. So clearly, there is that gap that Alphabet could catch up to these guys in terms of multiples, and Microsoft is close to 30 times earnings. So when the setup is such that expectations are higher, I mean, Microsoft had 34% growth in Azure. Still, that wasn't good enough to drive up the stock. So that's where expectations come into play.
Can you mention Llama and a potential integration? Explain to everyone what Llama is and how Meta Platforms is actually using it outside of sort of internally? I mean, I know, I don't know, am I seeing Llama when I go search on Instagram, when I search on WhatsApp?
Yeah,
Is
so
that Llama?
we've started hearing about Meta getting into their own search business.
Yeah.
And look, Google and Meta have that distinction of owning their large language model, whereas everyone else is dependent on OpenAI or Anthropic, which are independent companies. So in the case of Meta, they've had a lot of success. It's like Llama is on 3.2 release, and every release is getting better in terms of the native capabilities.
But can I download Llama as a standalone app right now?
No. So this is a
Like
large.
I can't download it like I download ChatGPT and use ChatGPT.
I mean, they're looking to go towards that model where you can use Llama in that form, but right now Llama is just being deployed across their family of apps, which is Instagram, WhatsApp, and Core Blue app. Again, owning a large language model is such a huge moat. And that's where, all these companies spending on data centers, the compute capacity, what they're looking to do is to really build on that large language model moat.
There you go.
There you go. Mandeep, we should let him get back to work. He's got
know.
a call to listen to. He's got a report to write. He's busy after Alphabet and Snap yesterday. We made him talk about Reddit. He didn't even know he was going to talk about Reddit yesterday. We made you go everywhere. Mandeep, thanks so much for joining us. Really do appreciate it. Okay, so Meta Platform shares moving in the after hours. They were down as much as 3%, now down about 2.7%. Katie, help me out with Microsoft and what Microsoft is doing.
I mean, I think it comes back to those high expectations as well. You see shares right now. It was a pretty clean quarter overall, and can't seem to quite get off the ground in the after hours trade. We've been toggling around 34 times earnings. That's what it's trading at. That's a pretty high bar, Tim.
Yeah, it is. Microsoft Cloud's computing business, the Office software, fueled stronger than expected quarterly revenue growth. It's a sign that the company's heavy investments in AI are starting to pay off. All right, let's get more now. We got Anurag Rana joining us. He has been looking at these numbers for the past 13 minutes or so. He's from Bloomberg Intelligence. Anurag, what sticks out to you from this report?
Yeah, the Azure number sticks out to us. That's 34% increase in constant currency. That's fairly impressive given the size of that business. And another thing they basically mentioned was it includes about 12 percentage points of growth coming from AI-related workloads. And Microsoft is the only company that's really quantifying it at a very, very, I would say, credible way at this point compared to any of the other companies. So, but at the same time, they're going to give guidance on the conference call. That's going to be in an hour from now. And I think that dictates what happens to the stock tomorrow.
Yeah, and of course, it'll be interesting to see how the market continues to digest these numbers, bouncing around all over in the after-hours trade. Talk to us a little bit more about the conference call. I mean, in addition to some more details on the cloud, what else will you be listening for?
Capital expenditures and how much more they're going to spend, and what is it going to do for margins. This is the first year where we're going to see Microsoft's operating margin dip probably about 100 to 150 basis points because of all the investments that they're doing. And they need to convince the street that these investments are worth the effort. That means they're going to spend the money this year, and over the next few years, you're going to see that money come back. And I think that's going to be a lot of discussion around capital expenditure as well as growth in Azure.
And of course, we're coming off the heels of pretty strong Alphabet results. I want to talk about the search business in particular. It feels like Bing has been the butt of the joke forever.
Rude.
Is it still?
You don't Bing things?
I don't.
Just Bing it.
Just Bing it.
Yeah, you got a question, just Bing it.
I'm going to start saying that. Are people saying that more, though? You think about all these investments that Microsoft has made in AI in particular. Is the search business seeing the fruits of that?
No, I would not say that. I think their market share has remained kind of in that, same number compared to the pre-AI era. Microsoft made a big deal about it when they launched, their Bing with AI features. And that was the big thing, that it's going to take down Google or take some market share away from it. So far, it hasn't happened. But I think, Microsoft is making a big noise about it. I also feel they're trying to do this because they may want to get a deal with Apple for the search in that particular ecosystem. So it's a good business, frankly, but that's not what's going to drive the stock. The stock is going to be driven by how the cloud growth is and how stable their Office business is.
One thing that was pretty remarkable about yesterday's results on Iraq from Alphabet, the parent of Google, is the cloud growth for that company. And Mandeep was in here reminding us that when it comes to the cloud race, you got AWS, you got Microsoft, and then in third place, you have Alphabet. So you're focused on Microsoft, the number 2 player when it comes to cloud. Why does somebody go to Microsoft, that somebody who isn't OpenAI, for example, why do they go to Microsoft instead of going to AWS or Google?
That's a very good question. And, if you go back to the history of cloud, AWS was the first company that really championed the cause of public cloud services. Then Microsoft came and said, listen, go back to the companies that have been doing a lot of tech spending and say, you already have a lot of your workloads on Microsoft's products, which is Microsoft servers, Microsoft operating system, and databases. Why don't you port over that workload to my cloud? So they really sold a lot of services as a function of hybrid cloud services, and that's really their bread and butter. But when it comes to AWS and Google, they're going after startups and trying to get more money from them.
How do you gain share in the cloud business? Is it a game of inches? I mean, what does that look like, that competitive landscape?
This is probably the most important thing we try to tell people that, if you go back and look at 10 years ago, AWS has held its market share just in the cloud infrastructure space, somewhere roughly around 35-40%, somewhere in that range. But the size of the cloud market has become so big. When it was about 100-200 billion at this point, this is probably 600-700 billion and above at that point. So the whole market is growing. And I think one of the places where people don't talk about, because of Gen AI, we think cloud growth is going to be even bigger. So in our view, all 3 companies, and for that matter, the 4th vendor, Oracle, they're all going to make good money over the next few years because it's easy to run those AI workload and experiments on the cloud rather than doing it on premise.
Okay, so is there anything we should be focused on in these results that don't have to do with Azure or the cloud?
The capital expenditures, I think, you can talk about gaming and a few other things, but to be very honest, the valuation Microsoft and AWS and Google have at this point, it's largely driven by how they're going to monetize the AI investments. Everything else is secondary. The good thing about Microsoft is it has the Windows operating system. It has Office. That provides a lot of cash flow where they can invest without investors getting worried about it.
Okay, Katie reminding me throughout the day that 20% of NVIDIA's revenue comes
like
from...
18.9%, okay, but close enough.
Almost 20% of NVIDIA's revenue comes from this one company, Microsoft. Another roughly 10% coming
10.1%
from Meta Platforms. This is according to the SPLC function on the Bloomberg terminal on Iraq. How should we think about CapEx from... And look, I know you don't cover NVIDIA, but how should we think about CapEx spend from Microsoft? Also what we heard from other companies this week with regard to NVIDIA, because that's certainly a focus for us and for our audience this week.
Yeah, and again, it's very difficult to tie at what part of CapEx is going towards data center, what is going to GPU. But one of the analysis that we did in recent weeks was, so from 2003 to 2005, we are looking at an increment of $90 billion from the likes of the top cloud providers and Apple and some other companies. And a lot of that is going to build the infrastructure. I think one of the things that can, bring down some of the AI craze would be when all these companies say, we're not going to be investing as much as we did before. I think that brings it down. But so far, what we have heard, investments are just ramping up right now. They're not slowing it down.
Okay, we got you for a couple more minutes. So I want to make sure we continue to pick your brain before you have to go and write this note on Iraq. But give us an idea of what you'll be listening for on the call a little later today, and how you're thinking about the note that you're going to end up writing tonight or tomorrow.
Yeah. So when you look at Microsoft results, again, the question is going to be, where is this growth coming from? Is it coming from directly the AI workloads, or is it coming from non-AI related cloud spending as well? Because that matters a lot for AWS, which is going to report Thursday night, because AWS does not have that level of AI related revenue coming in at this point. So there's going to be a lot of discussion whether Google and Microsoft are taking some share away from AWS or not. So I think over the next day or so, we get a big clarity that have we seen a big push in all cloud spending, or are we seeing some kind of a market share shift? I think it's all the vendors are going to benefit from that. But I think for us today, when we are listening to the call, the question is going to be where is that spend coming from?
Okay, and before we let you go, one more question on Amazon tomorrow. What's the most, obviously AWS is important, but given what we heard from Alphabet and what we heard from Microsoft, what's your expectation for Amazon and AWS tomorrow?
No, we should see an improvement in growth rate for AWS because after these two companies, if they don't report that, I mean, to be honest, that's not going to be good for them.
Yeah.
I don't think that's, unlikely. But at the same time, we also want to know what's going to happen with their margins. We have heard a lot about the company, trying to rein in extra expenditures, trying to boost their margins. At the same time, they're investing a lot in Gen AI. So I think those two elements, almost for every cloud company or any software company right now, are what's your Gen AI contribution and what is happening to your margin structure.
Anurag Rana, Senior Technology Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us from Chicago, talking all things Microsoft and expectations, of course, for tomorrow when it comes to Amazon and Meta platforms. You're not going to, Amazon and Apple, you're not going to be here tomorrow.
I won't. I'll be trick-or-treating blissfully. But I'll be sad to miss it because, it's interesting to see the market reaction to these numbers, of course. Microsoft, pretty clean quarter, a lot to get excited about. And still, the stock is only up 1% post-market.
They're not going to give you candy if you're not dressed up in a costume?
I have a costume.
Oh, what are you going to be?
My mom bought us witch costumes, actually.
Okay.
She didn't ask me.
No comment.
This was her idea. I had no input, so.
So you and Joe, or you and your mom are witches.
Yeah. Joe, I don't know. He's just going to wear a flannel and say he's a lumberjack.
Okay, go Joe.
Are you dressing up?
I am Little Red Riding Hood.
Oh.
I am told I'm Little Red Riding Hood by a 5-year-old.
No comment from me as well.
You know what?
Back at you.
You know what? I'm the father of yes. That's what I do, okay? Hey, let's shift gears a little bit to something that we feature each and every year on Bloomberg Business Week, highlighting the L'Oreal Women of Worth program, which for a 19th year is taking 10 nonprofit leaders from around the U.S. to recognize their philanthropic achievements. Back with us is Ali Goldstein. She's president of L'Oreal Paris USA. She joins us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Also with us is Janavi Rao, an honoree. She's founder and president of New Voters. It's a youth-led national nonprofit. What it does is it engages high school students. It's nonpartisan. They do near-peer mentorship to make sure that youth voices are heard and prioritized in politics. Ali, welcome back. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you again for having me.
Yeah,
it's really a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you every year. Remind everybody about this program.
Yeah, so L'Oreal Paris Women of Worth, as you said, it's our 19th year of fulfilling this program. It's our great honor, and it's really our essential philanthropic program that aligns to our tagline, because you're worth it. As a brand, L'Oreal Paris strives to really, truly support women's empowerment and the idea that everyone is worth it. And what that means is giving back to those and supporting those who are striving, to help others. Women helping other women is integrally part of our brand equity. And Women of Worth is a program that does just that. So we recognize 10 honorees every year. We have an extensive application program, and we find 10 women doing great things with their 10 organizations that span a spectrum of causes. And we support them and highlight what they're doing and really recognize the efforts. For the most part, they're very grassroots. So we find programs that really need us and need our help. So things that are not fully developed and scaled yet. And we bring support, a bit of financial support, we bring awareness, we bring networking and mentorship, and we help them get a bit of the scale and support that they need to do all the great work that they're doing.
And of course, one of those women is joining us right now. Janavi, tell us a little bit about New Voters, of course.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My name is Janavi, and I take the She Series, and I'm from outside of Philadelphia. And I'm super excited to share about what New Voters is up to. So yeah, we're a youth-led 501c3 dedicated to helping high school students find their voice in politics before they're old enough to vote, and then when they become old enough to vote. So 4 million students graduate from high school every single year, and around 90% of them are eligible to register and vote by the time they graduate. So this is a basically completely under-targeted population by voter outreach campaigns, by actual campaigns, and when it comes to largely voter registration. And because of that massive number, a like if high school students alone, if 18-year-olds alone voted at the same rate as baby boomers, 18-year-olds would be the deciding voice on every contested election in the country.
Why? Well, why don't they?
I mean, I think that a big part of it is that lack of outreach. There was a survey by Circle at Tufts, which is one of the leading youth research institutions in the country, and they found that in 2022, less than 50% of 18 to 24-year-olds were reached out to by any campaign. And when you think about 18-year-olds, if you think about just high school students alone, like I know I'm inundated with those messages being like, Jonavi, we're disappointed in you, donate to me. But I know that the high school students I work with aren't receiving those messages. They're not on these lists because a lot of them aren't going to be 18 because you can register to vote in most states at 17 if you'll be 18 by the election. So they're not getting that outreach. Maybe they don't know they can register to vote in time. And also there is, as I'm sure you guys know, just such a microscope on schools right now and fear of being political at all, that they see civic engagement and voter registration as being part of that. And you can't really blame them because they are being targeted and being harassed for doing things. So because of that, schools are really tentative to make voter registration, even though schools are meant to prepare students for future life and being an active civic and democratic participant is essential to that. They are not integrating voter registration into the programming. But logistical issues aside of, people getting reached out to, I also think that there is a lack of civics education in this country and a lack of seeing that democracy and voting is a way to create change. I think that any discussion, and if you guys have young people in your lives, I'm sure you know this, like young people aren't apathetic. They're desperate to be heard on the issues that impact our generation more than anybody else. It's just they don't see voting as a way to do that.
Would Jonavi have been picked had this not been an election year? Because I feel like her selection is like perfect, given that we're 6 days out from the election. But take us into the process.
Yeah.
And do you make it sort of timely?
So, okay, first, she would have been picked because she's fantastic and doing great work. But it is true that the honorees and their
I guess
causes...
I didn't really ask that question in a nice way.
No.
You know what I mean.
I know.
You guys
I
know what I
wanted to give
mean.
some love to Johnny. But in all seriousness, what's really fascinating about Women of Worth is the women and the organizations that we recognize are truly sort of a microcosm of what's happening at the time. And we see that each and every year. And so it's true that, what we see this year is programs around mental health, programs around sustainability, programs around voters. Like, we see a surge in topics that are present and relevant for these times. Coming out of COVID, we saw a lot more in healthcare. So there's definitely a representative of sort of what's current at the moment in time, and we see that represented. Then in terms of the process, we receive a couple thousand, 2,000 to 3,000 applications every year. We have a pretty rigorous process for recognizing and selecting the women. We invite our employees to get involved. We partner with Points of Light and an organization that helps us vet. And then we have, we narrow down and we have a final group that we select with colleagues that we work with, as well as our spokeswoman, Asia Naomi King, who's very involved in this as well. Every year, she helps select the finalists, and she's with us at the ceremony in November to choose the final 10.
All right, well, we're going to be speaking more about the final 10 in just a few minutes. We're going to do some news, and we're going to come back with Ali Goldstein, president of L'Oreal Paris USA, and Jonavi Rao, an honoree, the founder and president of the youth-led national nonprofit New Voters. In the meantime, a quick check of how Meta Platforms is doing after hours, down a little more than 1% after the company reported its latest quarter. Then Microsoft shares higher by 1.6%.
Yeah, some good news there, of course, when it comes to their cloud business. All eyes and ears on the earnings calls coming up. Maybe investors, keeping their chips close to them before they actually hear from these executives.
And then Amazon and Apple tomorrow.
A lot to look forward to.
Yeah, a lot to look forward to. You're listening to and watching Bloomberg Business Week. Next, more with the president of L'Oreal Paris USA.
It's 4:40 on Wall Street. I'm Amy Morris. This just crossing the Bloomberg terminal. Siemens will be acquiring Altair Engineering for $113 per share. That represents an enterprise value of $10 billion. Microsoft's cloud computing business and office software fueled stronger than projected quarterly revenue growth, a sign that the company's hefty investments in AI are starting to pay off. Microsoft shares are about 1.5% higher in post-market trading. Meta Platform shares are down 1.5% in the post-market after reporting revenue for the third quarter that met the average analyst estimate. Meta projected stronger than expected holiday quarter sales, saying the company's heavy investments in AI have also helped improve its core advertising business. Roku shares now down more than 4% in the post-market after reporting a fourth quarter adjusted forecast that missed estimates. And eBay forecasts net revenue for the fourth quarter. The guidance missed the average analyst estimate. Shares of eBay sinking in the post-market, now down nearly 10%. A rout in chip makers dragged down stocks, with traders sifting through corporate results and economic data. The S&P down 19 points, NASDAQ down 105, the Dow down 91, the 10-year Treasury yield at 4.29%, and the 2-year yield at 4.17%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, you can subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Amy Morris, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now back to Bloomberg Business Week with Tim Stenovec and Katie Greifeld.
All right, thank you so much for that update, Amy Morris. We're back now with Ali Goldstein. She, of course, is the president of L'Oreal Paris USA. Also joined by Genevieve Rao. She is, of course, the founder and the president of New Voters. Of course, one of the Women of Worth. This is the 19th year that L'Oreal Paris is doing this program. And, of course, we are 6 days away from the election, Genevieve, as you know very well. And I'm curious, what does New Voters look like post-presidential election?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the critical thing that you guys definitely know, but there are elections every single year. There's 2 elections every year. Some states there's 4 elections in a year, and civic engagement amongst everybody, but especially among young people, has to happen every day. 365, sometimes 366 days a year. So we are operational in around 400 high schools across the country, largely in Pennsylvania and Arizona. And what we do is we support the students and we empower them to run voter registration drives in their schools and get students who are both old enough to vote and also not old enough to vote to run a registration drive. In addition to that, every student is matched with a personal college mentor who helps them, figure out how to mobilize their school, how to, we're like, use the different social cliques at your school, like day one, get the lacrosse captain and the football captain to get their team registered. Then the drum major on day 2, and then day 3, like the NHS.
I imagine
president.
debate team, probably doesn't need much there.
No, there are some pools of people who are very civically engaged. There's actually, and this actually leads into another thing that we do, which is research on high school political behavior. Because anecdotally, you can probably think that, okay, the music kids and the debate kids are very registered to vote, and the STEM kids and the athletes are probably less so. And there's actually no real research into high school political behavior and civic engagement, kind of following along this trend of there not really being resources dedicated to high school students registering to vote. However, I do work with a number of incredible organizations. We lead a coalition called the New Voters Collaborative, which is around 30, 40 organizations dedicated to high school civic engagement, everything from the YMCA to When We All Vote. And we meet every month to talk about high school civic engagement. But we also have a research network dedicated to figuring out why high school students vote or what makes them want to, and that's all done by researchers 19 years old and under.
Genevieve, what's the link now to registering these students and them actually going out and voting? Just because someone's registered doesn't mean they're going to vote.
Yeah, absolutely. However, amongst high school students, 18-year-olds, they actually found that around 80 to 83% of 18-year-olds, once registered to vote, will turn out to vote, just as a controlled, looking at the voter file. So it is a pretty high conversion rate of registered voter to voter when it comes to 18-year-olds. I think that it is necessary, though, to follow up any registration with conversations, with information about registering to vote. I mean, it's something they found is as amazing as automatic voter registration is, which is when the DMV will automatically register you to vote when you register to vote. They found that has really low conversion rates of registered voter to voter, because it's not coupled with a conversation. It's not coupled with, This is why you should register to vote. So this is in no way saying that AVR shouldn't exist. It's incredibly important and essential to eliminating barriers to registering to vote. But it also means that you still need to have those conversations in the classroom. And again, that's something that teachers are afraid of doing. And that's why as a nonprofit, as a student-led organization, or youth-led, I'm no longer a student, we really prioritize having those conversations across the political divides regularly.
As we mentioned, Genevieve Rao, just one of the honorees of the L'Oreal Women of Worth program this year. Ali, give us an idea of some of the other 9 and where they're from and what they're working on.
So in total, the 10 women are a highly diverse group. So they represent many, many causes. They're represented across the United States, across age, ethnicity, and that is an important part of our program to really be as diverse as possible. In terms of causes, there's quite a few very significant and emotional causes. So there's a woman named Laura Pahulis who runs an organization called Control Alt Delete, and she provides resources for women who are in domestic violence situations to literally escape those dangerous environments. So she and her organization will literally come and rescue women and their children and help them get out of these organizations. So that's one. There's another organization that is about helping refugees. We also know that's a very important topic of recent. Her name is Maymuna. Her organization is the Tia Foundation. So she supports helping refugees get on their feet following their move. And then there are more health-focused organizations. So Sherry Mathis leads an organization called the Mammogram Poster Girls, which seems pretty straightforward, but is so needed. And I think what she has identified is that women in underserved, underprivileged neighborhoods are underrepresented getting mammograms. And we know you can prevent breast cancer through early detection, or at least prevent mortality, prevent the most significant issues with early detection. And so her organization is really about providing mammograms, free mammograms, to women who normally don't have access to them, which is really, really powerful. So the women are really fantastic. It's a great group, all with amazing causes. You've met all of them, Genevieve, and so you've seen. I think what's also very powerful is we don't only just have the 10 this year, but we have 190 women behind us.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit, because you've been coming on this program each and every year for as long as I've been doing this program. And every year you bring somebody.
Yes.
And what they talk about are the resources that they have with this group of alumni.
Yeah, so what we do over time is, we give them awareness. We've evolved to be much more digitally led, social. So it was a bit more traditional 5 years ago, when we've really moved how we activate the Women of Worth to be much more modernized, so more digital. We've enhanced with a program called Global Giving, which not only do we give financial resources, but now we have an opportunity through globalgiving.org for consumers to contribute to the organizations as well. And we've added a network through LinkedIn where we've connected all the 190 women. And when you have 190 women, you can imagine there's overlapping causes. But that's not a detriment, because now we have a network of women who can help other women who've been in similar circumstances. So the women who were recognized 10 years ago have evolved their organizations, they've scaled, they've learned, they've made mistakes, and now they can help the younger women, the newer women, support their organizations. The other thing is next year is our 20th anniversary, which is super exciting. We are planning very big things. Our ambition is to bring back all 200 women and make a real celebration of the impact that all of these 200 women have had together over the last 20 years, which is really powerful and really exciting.
Well, now you have to do it. You said it.
I know.
You said it on Bloomberg.
It's out there. It's on the record.
So now you
It's
have
on
to
the
do
record.
it. Ali Goldstein, president of L'Oreal Paris USA, here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Also with us, Genevieve Rao, honoree, founder and president of New Voters. It's that youth-led national nonprofit. They work to engage high school students to ensure that youth voices are heard and prioritized in politics. It is Bloomberg Business Week. That is Katie Greifeld. I'm Tim Stenevec. Katie in for Carol Master today. Shares of Microsoft higher by 0.8%. Shares of Meta Platforms down by 1.3%. More on earnings after this. This is Bloomberg.
listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Tim Stenovec. That is Katie Greifeld. She's in for Carol Masser. Shares of Meta platforms right now are moving in the after hours, down about 2.5%. Sales narrowly beat on AI, boosting advertising revenue. They projected stronger than expected a holiday quarter. The company said that the company's heavy investments in AI have also helped improve its core advertising business. We got with us Bloomberg News technology reporter Kurt Wagner. He joins us, I believe, from our Denver office.
Looks amazing, wherever Kurt is.
Yeah, he's close to the Rocky Mountains. That's all that matters.
Wow.
Kurt, what happened with Meta Platforms today? What's the highlight?
Yeah, I'm sort of surprised, honestly, to see the stock moving in the negative direction, just because revenue for the third quarter was a little bit better than expected. Guidance for the fourth quarter was in line, if not a little bit better than expected. And expenses were, where they've been saying they've been all year. So I do think that the expectations for this company have gotten really high, especially after we saw those smart glasses that they demoed a few weeks ago. They've been talking about AI all year. So anything other than a real home run maybe feels like a little bit of a letdown. But for the most part, Meta kind of came in where everyone was expecting them to come in for the third quarter. And as you mentioned, they're really touting AI as the reason, saying that that's been helping with the ads business.
Yeah, Meta shares currently off just a little bit post-market, 2.4%. But Kurt, as we've been talking about, I mean, this is a company whose stock is higher by 67% through today's market close this year. So expectations were certainly high. We still, of course, have yet to hear from Mark Zuckerberg. What do you think that analysts and investors really want to hear at this juncture?
I think the narrative with them for the last several quarters has been the trade-off between investing in these, ambitious long-term AI projects and not forgetting what, the bread and butter is for this company, which is advertising, right? And so we've seen that tension over the last, really several years, but several quarters in particular, where they've been saying, hey, expenses are really high. They're going to continue to be high, but, we have all these cool things coming down the line. And people also wanting to say, well, what about right here and now, right? You have Instagram, you have WhatsApp, you have Facebook. Like, how do you continue to kind of build those businesses without, just focusing on the metaverse? So I imagine that sort of tension of, spending and staying focused on the here and now is probably going to be what we're going to hear a lot about.
Let's talk about the metaverse. I love making fun of the metaverse. We were talking with a portfolio manager about 2 hours ago. Who was that?
Michael.
Yeah, he was lovely. And he was saying that they're still spending a lot of money on the metaverse. They're just not talking about it. Is that a fair characterization? What is the current relationship between Meta and the metaverse?
I should have said Michael Sansotera. I'm sorry, I only said his first name.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
we all
He's
know
on a first name
Michael.
basis. He's over at Sylvan Capital.
We all know Michael.
Yeah.
Classic Michael. No, I feel like that's right. I do think the investment is still coming in. It's not just in like the virtual world that, eventually Mark Zuckerberg hopes we're all hanging out in, playing in. It's in the hardware that you're going to use to access it, right? It's in those Quest headsets. It's in that augmented reality glasses, Orion, that they debuted a few weeks ago. So I do think they're spending a lot of time and resources on building that. Now, I think they have learned that talking about it is not necessarily the smartest business decision, right? And so you've seen the narrative around this company change this year from metaverse to AI, because AI is more widely accepted, and people, I think, maybe better understand where AI can play a role versus this sort of nebulous metaverse idea. So I do think the investment is still happening, but to your point, I think it's sort of happening behind the scenes, and instead they're choosing to talk about something people want to hear about, which is, artificial intelligence.
Kurt, Tim is going to rip my mic away, but I have one more quick question.
How dare you.
Do you think that Mark Zuckerberg, if he had waited just like a year or two, that we'd be talking about AI platforms instead of meta platforms right now? Does he regret that name change?
I do. I've thought about that, right? Because it feels like he hit it way too early. Now, if we all end up playing in the metaverse 15 years from
Joke's
now,
on
and that's where
us.
everyone's working, he'll sit there and twiddle his thumbs and smile at us probably. But it does feel like one of those things where They pivoted hard, they made that the narrative, and now they've sort of quickly changed that tune. And I do wonder if, maybe he would have done something a little bit different had he waited another 12 to 18 months.
If you guys are all in the metaverse hanging out with each other in 15 or 20 years, I'm going to be alone by myself.
With legs, hopefully.
Yeah. Still working on that. Get the AI on
We'll
that.
invite you, Tim. You just probably won't show up, but we will invite you.
Hey,
He'll be
the invite is all that counts. I appreciate that, Kurt. Hey, before we let you go, Kurt, what's going on with Reddit? Shares higher today by more than 40%. The forecast and the results beat analysts' expectations. I mean, there's a beat and then there's a beat.
Yeah, this is crazy. 40+% is a pretty good day, as you both know. But I think this is an example of a company that came out. I mean, it just went public in March, right? So Reddit is still very new to this public company life. I think there were a lot of people with realistic kind of skepticism about what this could look like, right? Was this another Twitter? Is this a Facebook? Is it something in between? And I think when they have sort of consistently delivered